feels very good to take off that mask just for a few minutes. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so thankful for Lake City for having this and for being able to come out and, like Sue said, talk books. I love to talk books. I love reading. My most recent series is my Avalon series. It's a YA fantasy. I wrote it because I wanted to have more teen female characters in books. I felt that a lot of the novels I was reading was mostly two guys and a girl. And the girl usually fell into the same stereotype. Very smart, a little snooty. So I wanted to have a lot more personality of girls for people like my daughter to read. So that was really the motivation behind my Avalon series. A long time ago, I lived up near Hinckley, Minnesota. So this does start out in northern Minnesota, around that area. It's about 4 teenagers who make a wish in a wishing well, and that ends up upsetting the balance of power in the land of Avalon. So they must go there to retrieve their wishes before an evil wizard can get it and use that power to escape his prison. So that was the first novel that I wrote. And then the second novel is also out, where the 4 teenagers begin to discover a little magic in themselves. And maybe that they have ancestral ties also to some of the legends of King Arthur's time. You get to meet some of the women from King Arthur's time and some descendants from some Knights of the Round Table. So I had a lot of fun kind of exploring that aspect of it and bringing some of those strong female characters from history a bit more to life, with, I'm sure, much historical license. I mean, some artist license, so. The third book is set to come out this June, so I'm very excited to have that. It'll kind of be a conclusion to this adventure of trilogies, and I hope to do more. This is published through a small market publisher. They're based out of Houston, Texas, actually, and they've been great to work with. My other novels are self-published, so I published these through Amazon. The Rochester Public Library did have a Frankenstein contest, and so this novella, while not selected as one of their finalists, I decided to publish on my own. It is about a human zoo on an alien world. Growing up, I watched lots of Star Trek, so I have quite the science fiction kind of history. So that's where this came from. I hope to do more science fiction as well, just from all I've watched and read growing up. The novel I'm going to read to you from today is my first novel, and I went to a King Tut exhibit, and I noticed all of the artwork, the furniture, everything was surrounded by King Tut and his wife in very loving poses. But we don't know much about her. We're not even sure where her mummy is. So what happened to someone who was so beloved and then disappeared? That's where the motivation for this came from. I've always been fascinated by ancient Egypt, and I have over 50 books in my own personal collection. So you could call me an armchair archaeologist. I also wrote a second novel because the time of King Tut's family is very fascinating to me. Their dad introduced monotheism, whereas once there were thousands of God, he's trying to get them all to worship one. So you can imagine the challenges that would pose, especially economic. So I really wanted to explore that more. So in my second novel, I explored the older sister of King Tut and what it was like during that time. This novel takes place, when they're in that home with the monotheism and then going back to polytheism and having to, all that blowback from the other priests and whatnot, and trying to establish that kingdom again. And they're so young. They're not even teenagers when they have to be doing this. So I'm going to read you a section. There's 2 sections in the novel running concurrently, one when they're growing up, and then one when it's after King Tut has passed away and his wife is trying to find a prince from another place to help her establish the reign instead of the people around her who she feels threatened by. So that is one of the sections I'll be reading to you from. 1322 BC. We met in the belly of the night, Tia and I had stolen ourselves a raft and rode silently upriver for our appointment. As we pulled up to the bank, both of us jumped off and pulled the light raft ashore, enough so it wouldn't catch a wave and leave us stranded. The water was low this time of year as farmers harvested the lands. We had traveled to a small island that emerged every low season. There were papyrus trees and plants enough to cover our meeting from the banks we had just departed from. We walked along a narrow path between the thin boughs and emerged in front of 3 men and their horses. They had tall black steeds which were dripping wet. The men must have ridden their animals through the water's shallower depths. I'd heard of it done before, but horses were not abundant in Kemet, so we were not a part of my daily life, not since Akhenaten. The men were wild looking, their hair and beards clumped up and filled with dirt. I wondered if this was how all Hittites appeared, or if it was from the fierce crossing through the Redlands. Scorched by Aten relentlessly during the day, I could only imagine how such intense travel affected men. I'd never gone beyond the Nile shores, as my husband had. I'd never left the safe, secure Blacklands. There were so few here tonight. I figured that surely a company traveling with a prince would have an army with him, and no army could have passed our borders without my knowledge. This morning, a messenger arrived for me with notice that King Sabal-Alima's chamberlain wished to speak with me. I had feared my request would go unanswered, and I'd be left to the mercy of power-hungry men I had grown up with, and once thought I could trust, men who lusted for the pharaoh's throne and not his well-being. No, that was not true. I had never trusted but Horemheb? His betrayal saddened me as Tutankhamun had had such a strong bond with him. The Hittites bowed to me. I took that as my cue to begin. Noblemen of King Sabal-Alima, thank you for your speedy arrival, though I failed to see my husband to be in your entourage. The man standing in the middle straightened and looked me straight in the eye. He looked overly confident about something. He pulled out a papyrus that was brown, withered, and cracked. He spoke easily in Khemtu. King Amenhotep III made it clear to my people and to all peoples outside your borders that for a king, the gift of women in marriage was for Kemet alone. It was a one-way trade. He wrote to my king, from which I will read to you now. From time immemorial, no daughter of the king of Kemet is given to anyone. My great and wise highness Sabal-Alima is therefore surprised and suspicious of this offer you present to him. He proclaims that such a thing has never happened in his entire lifetime. How can he believe such a proposal when your own flesh and blood has earlier proclaimed such a union forbidden? He fears a trick of you and your people. I took in a slow breath. There was so much I wanted to say. I was angry, confused, frustrated, and hopeless all in one blink of a moment. But mostly I was scared, as these men could do anything to me under the blanket of night, and no one would be the wiser. They could kill me and plunge our lands into chaos. Perhaps that was their plan all along, rid themselves of Kemet threat by eliminating its last royal bloodline. I could tell by this man's tone, he felt his people didn't need me. I felt so stupid. Desperation had led me into danger I should have been more prepared for. Again, I took in a breath. The men standing across from us watched me. Their eyebrows were thick and tilted upwards. I could not glean their emotions from such an expression, but it looked to me like boredom. I thought of my mother and how she looked when dealing with foreigners. I thought of her lips slightly pursed, her upturned chin, her deep, penetrating eyes, her face without lines of worry or fear. I thought of my mother. My voice was steady. Noblemen, I have come to you alone, unguarded, to show you that I can be trusted and that I trust you. I think we should combine our nations, and I offer myself to your people so that you may see that my wish is genuine. I'm not my grandfather, and I'm not my father. I can see a land where two countries become the largest and the strongest in the entire world. Together we will create an heir next in line to the throne who will carry this dynasty of our peoples into greatness, the likes of which has never been touched. I beg you to take back to your king my offer. The chamberlain hesitated. I am still weary of what you say. This could be your country trying to eliminate mine, bringing our men into your borders under the facade of peace, and then murdering them too far away from home to get help. If we trust you, it could destroy my people. Or it could be the greatest blessing your people have ever seen. Just think of what it would be like to no longer fight. Separated, we cannot defeat one another, but together? Can you even imagine what our people could accomplish? All I ask is for a husband to lead beside me and continue my family's reign. He will be king, and I will be his loyal queen. He will rule over lands much larger than anything his fathers ever looked upon. When you travel back to your home, look out across the desert. You will own it all. We will own everything. All was quiet a moment. I will let my king know of your desires, but I am not of his thoughts. He could choose to reject your offer, no matter what I say. It was my turn to bow. Thank you, honored chamberlain. I will write another claim to show him of the urgency. We have little time. Once the rock is laid over my husband's tomb, I will be married to someone else. Time is running out for us. We depart from here tomorrow after the sun sets. We will not wait for your arrival. You will either be here or not. This will show us of your loyalty. I'm afraid, Queen, that time is running out for you and you alone. The kings of Kemet grow weaker each passing year. Perhaps we should just wait out a few more pharaohs and we'll be able to conquer your lands on our terms. For a moment, my blood ran as cold as the Nile. Then perhaps you do not know the story of Sekhmet and Ra. Ra, old and no longer respected by mankind, sent down Sekhmet, whom he created from the fire, the anger in his eye. She was created as a weapon, a warrior goddess, because of man's disobedience. Her name means to be strong, mighty, and violent. She almost destroyed all of mankind. If not for the aged king's pity, a woman would have drunk up your bloodline long before you were born. Do not be too caught up in the appearance of man, for behind a king, a woman waits, ready to slay those who threaten. On her lips, your life tastes as sweet as wine. So fierce was Sekhmet, not even Ra could silence her. He had to trick her into a deep slumber. I would pray she does not reawaken on your journeys back to your homeland. If you hear the laughter of a lioness echoing around you as you travel, well, let this be your warning. The chamberlain smiled wickedly in return. I spoke again. You have my word. My trusted woman beside me will deliver the message into your hands well before you leave. Tia nodded to them. Then we turned and departed. As we